Welcome to Mastering the Art of Real Estate. I'm your host, Debbi DiMaggio. We are here today with Dr. Philip Neri. He is coming, actually, I'm not even sure where he's coming to us live from. Can we let the doctor in? Hi, Al. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. Where are you coming to us from?
I'm from Denver.
Denver. Oh, we love Denver. Denver's amazing. Our kids went to Boulder. So I say we lived there for 8 years because we were back and forth. And just in the 8 years, now this has been a while back, but just watching the growth of Boulder and Denver has been incredible. It's such a great place.
Yeah, it's
So
actually I did.
beautiful.
Yeah, I did my undergrad at Boulder. So
Oh, did you? Yeah, they did too. Oh, I don't know. It's gorgeous. It looks, I remember dropping in to look at the college and just dropping in the Flatirons, and it just looked like the foothills of Italy. It was incredible. Those buildings are just, there's nothing like it. A
it's
great place. Go ahead.
no, it's different. Yeah, it's different for sure.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty incredible. So, before we launch into your journey, let me properly introduce you. Dr. Philip Neri is a performance psychologist, elite coach, and top producing real estate entrepreneur who helps serious leaders build teams that actually work. With a PhD in performance psychology and a background in high level athletics, Dr. Al is the founder of Cohesion HQ, a leadership consultancy built on trust, clarity, and execution. Whether he's coaching nationally ranked athletes, scaling real estate teams, advising CEOs or SWAT teams, his approach cuts through the noise, no fluff, no slogans, just real frameworks that drive results. His unique blend of mindset, structure, and no BS leadership has helped individuals and teams operate at their highest level, even under pressure. Wow, that's a mouthful. That is incredible, all of the things you do. And you hit on so many things that I am so passionate about mindset, SWAT teams, even though it would not be something I would do. I'm pretty obsessed with those types of TV shows, and that's pretty incredible that you work with them. And of course, athletes and CEOs. But so tell me, I'm very visual, so I want to hear how you got to where you are today, where you grew up, and how you led into all of these different things that you do so successfully.
um, got it. So I was actually born and raised in London.
Oh,
We
okay.
came to the States when I was 13 for my family to buy a business. Unfortunately, we had a lot of difficulty once we came to the States, and we actually got deported. And we actually
Oh,
came
wow.
back. That'd be a whole different podcast if I
Wow.
sing your story. You guys sing your story about that and that whole
Wow.
episode. And it has nothing to do with immigration or immigration policy. It was just something that happened personally within our family during that time. Um, and then I had actually just finished high school when that all occurred. So when I came back, did undergrad at Boulder. Plan was to go to med school. Didn't work out. I had my first daughter at the age of 19, and
Wow.
so and yeah, and I was an athlete. I was traveling a lot, and something had to sacrifice. So it was great. And so I tell people I barely scathed out of Boulder, and with like a 2.00001, and but obviously
Wow.
no med school in the country was gonna take me. So fast forward, I got on the government service, started in youth corrections, bounced around within different government agencies, did special operations, had a very unique position after Columbine High School regarding school violence. Ran a juvenile correctional facility for the state of Colorado for a number of years, and I just woke up one day and was like, you know, what happens if I just try to do my own thing? So, 2004, I became an entrepreneur. I left government service. I left that safety net. I left that, I was paid fairly well. Um,
Right.
I left all that to become an entrepreneur. So I opened my own boxing martial arts gym. We started flipping
Wow.
houses. We had an English rental car. I was dabbling in anything that kind of remotely made. And out of that
Wow.
came a real estate license in '07. So I've been licensed since '07 because I know a lot of your viewers are agents. So then I had to balance being an agent and being an investor, and I had to figure that out. And I was doing stuff in Denver. I was doing stuff in Detroit. So I just had to figure that out, and where that balance lied. Um, And so I scaled that up to I've invested in 21 markets. I spoke for all the big boy
Wow.
TV shows for 6 years. I traveled internationally for those guys, did a lot of seminars on investing and how to be an investor that's agent friendly, not you don't have to be a jerk, you know what I mean? Like to agents. Agents work really, really hard. And so long story short, through all that, I had my gym. I coached a lot of professional athletes. Stuck around. I got a master's degree while I was in the government. Anyways, fast forward, got a PhD, and I didn't quite know that my specialty was going to be team cohesion, and that's what my research was going to be. I knew that performance psychology was something I believed in, and for some people that's running a marathon. For some people, it's moving a millimeter forward. But either way, it's forward momentum. But so what came out of it was actually I got fascinated with the there is research on team cohesion, but there were some holes and there were some gaps. And for anybody that does a PhD, that's how you justify your research. There has to be a gap. You have to fill a void
Okay.
that's there. So what I did was I ended up, researching a theory that had been around since the 80s, formulated in the early 90s, that gave a framework for people on how to build a team. And it didn't matter if you were a SWAT team, didn't matter if you were an athletic team, didn't matter if you were a corporate team, didn't matter if you were a real estate team. There's a framework. There's a
Wow.
framework building a team. And so I started to get fascinated with this framework and I was like, hold on, I've coached for years. And there's no playbook for how to coach. Really, you're going off of your previous examples of how you were coached, right? Or you were raised. And sometimes you swear up and down, that you're like, well, I'll never do that if I'm ever a coach. And then you end up repeating the cycle because nobody told you how to do things differently. So that's where I really niched my research in regards to basically team cohesion, hence Cohesion HQ. And then when I defended my dissertation, they asked me, they were like, what are you going to do? And obviously they want you to publish, right? They
Oh,
want you to go to academia. That's what the PhD world wants. To me,
oh.
that's like torture. And I was like, no, 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 no. So I was like, I think I'm going to bring this research to the world, and I'm gonna find its space. And so, I graduated in December, and since then, all I've done is organic outreach. Like I'm reaching out to anybody and everybody that I know, saying, "Hey, I've got a framework. Do you want to hear more? Can we do a Zoom? Can we do a call?" And that's now leading. It's niching very much into police departments because they like it. They like it a lot.
Right.
Uh,
Wow.
teams really obviously athletic environments are they're starting to really like it. And now it's so I'm just in all fairness, I'm planting my seeds to see
Right.
where cohesion HQ goes and things of that nature. But that's probably a nutshell of
So
how my journey
so
evolved.
so this is new. So this is this cohesion. So this is literally just December you graduated and are starting this and are launching this. Well, it's
Yeah,
incredible. And of course, I mean, like you said, it could hit in there's teams in everything, every sort of business, whether you're independent contractor. So if you will, so we're just my husband and I have been together working for 35 years. Our son is now working with us. We have two more agents that are under us. It's taken forever for me to understand how a team works within a real estate or residential real estate agents. How can you share your framework for
absolutely,
us?
absolutely. So there's
Okay.
five pillars. There's five pillars to the framework, and
Okay.
before I share that, um,
Hmm.
I would tell people consider your family a team, consider
Yeah.
your marriage a team.
Right.
If
Okay.
you're a teacher, consider that specific classroom, period one, a team. Period two is a team. Period three is a team. Whenever you've
Mm.
got a group of individuals that come together and there's a common objective, in theory, if you run that like a team and apply
Hmm.
this framework, I promise you now what you'll have is direction. That's it. It's going to give you a sense of direction. And that's it. So the first thing in the first pillar of the framework is mastery experience. So when we talk about mastery experience, and I'll probably use a lot of athletic examples just so people
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
is you've got to do something 1,000 times, 5,000 times, 10,000 times to where something becomes instinctual, right? That was
Mhm.
true in arrest control in the government. It was true when I fought in the ring, because when everything goes to par and you're tired, or you're on the tail end of the stick you don't want to be on, you're going to resort back to what comes instinctual to you. And
Mhm.
so when we look at mastery experience, the trick is to break down everything in your that individual's role that you would want them to have mastery experience with. And I tell people that the goal is to get everybody to a 10 out of 10. Now we know that the way humans operate, we all have strengths and we all have areas of improvement. So some things may come quicker to be a 10 out of 10. Other things you've got to work really, really hard to get to a 10 out of 10. So when we just take mastery experience for realtors, I mean, we'll go through it. You got to have contract knowledge.
Mhm.
You got to have people skills. You got
Mhm.
to have high real estate IQ. You've got to have the ability to problem solve. You have to have the ability to talk people off the ledge. You have you have to deal with disenfranchised couples who are on two ends of the spectrum. So, AKA, we all laugh that you're like a marriage counselor, psychologist. Well, yeah, it's true. It's true
Yeah.
at times. It's very true. But you now got to be a marketing expert. You got to
Mhm.
understand social media. You got to also know how to work your raving fans. You got to know how to farm a neighborhood. You, I mean, the list is endless, right? For the skill set a realtor needs in today's marketplace, unless they're working on a very structured assembly line
Right.
type team kind of thing, where you just have to kind of do one thing, right? And and I tell everybody there's no bad business model. It's just whatever's in whatever model you're in, team, brokerage, as long as it's working for you, great. No, there's no one that's superior to other. So if we look at that as a leader, and now you take the time to break down everything that your agents need to have mastery experience in, and then AKA grade them on where they're at on a scale of 1 to 10. Have them grade themselves on where they're at of a 1 to 10. Now, your job as a leader is to say, okay, what am I doing to provide them the skill set so they can get the repetitions that they can become a 10 out of 10? And once they're performing at that 10 out of 10, okay, now we've checked the box on mastery experience, right? But
Mhm.
we all know that 10 out of 10, I mean, the best athletes in the world continue to train. This is where it's, are we
Right.
are we moving the needle by a marathon, or are we moving the needle by a millimeter? Right? The most successful people in the world understand that you continue to move a millimeter at a time, a
Mm.
millimeter at a time, a millimeter at a time. You could have got better on. I don't like the word scripts, but you could have got better on conversation, right?
Mhm.
And talking points and things of that nature. Well, even though you've gone to scripts training 3 times a week for the last 36 years, well, congratulations. You know what I mean? That's dedication. But are you really a great conversationalist? Are you really good at extracting what you need? So we got master experience. Pillar number 2 is vicarious experience. So vicarious experience is that people learn from observation of other people's interactions, right? So when you take a team and you are sitting there and you're kind of green, or you're maybe you're at a 5 out of 10 on a certain scale, and you watch an interaction between another team member, and depending on how that interaction goes, it either leaves you with one or two feelings: that you feel confident that you can learn and make a mistake, or you feel petrified that you cannot make a mistake if you don't do something perfectly well. So what I like to use is I tell people, I kind of bring in a unique term here, and I bring in a role model, and I say, if you ran your team as if you were a role model and you don't even know who's observing you, because that's true in life, right? You never know who's looking up to you. You have
Mhm.
no idea who's looking up to you, right?
Right.
It could. at a gym and you're working out and somebody just sees you there every day, pounding the pavement, doing what you got to do, getting after it, and they're admiring you every day, and you don't even know it. And I don't mean admiration in a weird way. I'm just, they're like,
No.
man, this is really cool. So the thing is, as a leader, if you always compose yourself as a role model in any interaction you have, because you don't know who's watching, and that's not the reason you're doing it, right? Because you don't know who's watching, you're doing it because it's the right thing to do. Now think about that from leadership, of how people who are maybe a little intimidated, or they don't feel like they have the right skill set, now think about what you do for their confidence, their ability to come and ask for help, or their ability to be like, oh, I didn't catch something. Like for example, like when I first got licensed, we were entering that foreclosure crisis, right? And I
Hmm.
had a guy who, and he had like 50, $60,000 cash, and he was a unique individual, and he wanted to make an offer on a property in Denver, and we got it under contract. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but he had asked me at closing, like, "Who's paying for title insurance?" And I was like, "Well, you are." And he went off the deep end on me in the closing. And the closer said, "Hey, can I talk to you real quick?" And she was like, "No, actually, the bank is going to pay for it." And I was like, "Where is that?" Right? Right. So I went back in and I apologized. I said, "Hey, I stand corrected, right? I'm just learning, right?" So you think about it, you think about just that experience, but and obviously, unbeknownst, I obviously wasn't really trained that well, right, for mastery experience, right, to even be in that situation. But you just look at that. I mean, now, like, think about how I felt with how that
Right.
title gal helped me, right? And if somebody else was watching that, they're like, "Oh, that was really nice of her." Like she took him aside to just be of service of him. So just understanding that people learn by watching you communicate with other people, right? And think of parenting, right? Parenting 101 is your kids
Right.
follow everything you do, right? They're just observant, observant, observant. They follow everything you do. So pillar number three is the culture, the verbal and social culture of your organization. How are people talked to? How do people talk to one another? Right? And I'm
Hmm.
and I'm never about lowering standards. That's what I always want to be very, very clear about. And I think that's why the police departments have really attached to my training. I'm not trying to
Right.
lower standards for people. I'm not trying to make excuses for bad performance or bad behavior. What I'm talking about is raising the standards, but let's do it from a positive connotation versus a negative connotation, right? And let's get people to want to raise the bar,
Hmm.
because they want to be excellent. So you can still hold people accountable. You can still have standards. But the biggest thing is when somebody violates that, how do you react to that? Right? Now, there is frequency and duration, and we dealt with this in the criminal justice field all the time. Frequency and duration of behavior. If somebody has a one off, okay, they have a one off, right? As long as it's not too severe, right?
Hmm.
But they made a mistake. Okay, they made a mistake.
Hmm.
But if the frequency and duration of that behavior becomes repetitive, we now have a problem. So now, in that culture you're creating, you're recognizing that. And that doesn't mean that you don't let people go, or hey, you're not a good fit, or have you ever thought about another career? That's not what we're talking about. But again, it's how you do it, right? Do you still leave people with dignity and respect? And do you have an environment where people are willing to help one another out, right? And that there's a level of comfort there that you're intimidated to go to the top producer. Let's say you're a team of 10 or something like that, right? And some of these
Hmm.
guys are 30 and 40, and
Right.
nobody wants to go to the top producer because the top producer doesn't have time for you, right? Or, well, that's not a great culture, right? That's
Right.
not top producer potentially could have a lot of knowledge to bring those other people up to par, right? But we all know, aka the image that sometimes it goes with it in our industry. Um, Pillar number four, principle number four, is emotional states. So the best way I can describe this is Do you know when somebody in your world is having a day off? They're having an off day. Sorry, not a day off. They're having an off day. You know that they're off. You know they're off, right?
Right.
You know your kid is off. You know your buyer's agent is off. You know it, you sense it, you can see it. You don't know what's going on. Well, as a leader, how about you go and figure out what's going on? And
Hmm.
there's, I get it. Some people are private, right? But recognizing that somebody is having an off day is important because there's emotions that come with that, right? So, and it could just be that, you got a buyer's agent and they've been chatting you on showing homes and they got to go out on their first time. And so they come to the office and you would expect that they're pretty excited that they're going out, but no, they're a nervous wreck, right? Because, well, what if I miss something? What if I misspeak? What if I do this? What if I lose a key? What if I can't open a lockbox? What if the key falls through the deck hole and I lose a key? Well, and any seasoned veteran, you're laughing because it happens to all of us, right? And you're like,
Exactly.
oh, it's not going to happen, right? You can't open the door. What do you
Exactly.
do?
Yes.
Things happen, right? But they don't
Right.
know that they're just getting started. So the question is recognizing it, right? Recognizing it and doing something with that information, whatever it is that you need to do, right? Whether it's pump them up, reassure them that they are ready, letting them know you're available, right? Like I'm on standby. If you need something, I'm here, or maybe they're not ready to get let loose and you got to send somebody with them. And what does your shadowing program look like, right? Is it like teaching a kid how to ride a bike where you're super involved, but eventually you got to let them go and they're probably going to fall and things of that nature, but you're there to pick them back up and be like, you're okay, let's get back on the bike, right? Like if you think like that, just understanding the emotion that goes with it. And then the last pillar is actually physiological states. So physiological states comes out of emotion, right? Everybody deals with emotion differently, but the physiological state is what AK runs the emotion, kind of thing. So I'll use the analogy of fighting in the ring. It's very very common that we'll have a guy's hands wrapped, warming him up, ready to go. He's prepared, and I'm talking about like they fought. It's not even their first fight, and they got to go to the bathroom. They're like, all right,
Oh God.
we'll like go to the bathroom, right? Not a big deal, right? They go to the bathroom, they come back out, and then they got to keep going to the bathroom to where like they feel like they got to go to the bathroom like every 3 4 5 minutes. Well, there's no way. They haven't consumed that much water. Like they don't need to go to the bathroom that much, but it's just it's their way of handling their nerves that
Wow.
they need a pee. So as a coach, you're like, all right, go to the bathroom, because that's not the time to adjust behavior, right? Like it's just like you play the game a little bit with them, glove them up, everything's fine, and then when you debrief the fight and you get back in the gym, you're like, hey, here's something you really didn't need to go to the bathroom. That was just your nerves. Your nerves were making you feel like you needed to go to the bathroom, even though you didn't need to go to the bathroom. So from the emotional state, you're going to get a physiological episode or reaction kind of thing, and that is what you need to really teach people how to control, because you might be super nervous on the inside, like super nervous, but at some point you still got to flip the light switch on and you got to show up, correct? So it's this is a feeling, what do I do with this feeling so I can still show up and play the game? So what I tell people is when we take that framework and we look at those 5 principles or those 5 pillars,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
now sit there and we start with mastery experience, and then we start going through, okay, do you feel like you're a role model? Or are you short with your people when they ask you a question? Did you start looking, now we start analyzing leadership, right? And then the next
Yeah.
one, we look at the culture. Then the next one, we start talking about your own emotions, other people's emotions, and then have you noticed the way people react to emotions, kind of things of that nature. So when we start breaking that down and you break that down by person, now what you have is you've got a framework. And now you say, okay, let's address XYZ. And the addressing is usually all the way around. It's within the team members and it's also within the leadership structure, kind of thing. And I'll tell you, like I had a team of 12 and I was guilty, right? My responses would be ultra short. Like
Right.
ultra, when they texted or something like that, it'd be ultra short. And my attitude was, well, you're on your phone during a team meeting, so you're not paying attention. But now you need me on a Saturday at 6 p.m. and I'm supposed to be like available for
Yeah. Yes, we know that.
you. Respect goes two ways, right? Like
Right.
when you want to put effort in and be focused, then I'll put effort in and be focused. Not sure that that's the greatest leadership tactic, right? But I would get frustrated, right? I would get
Right.
frustrated because because you are pulled kind of thing. So now again, if we reran this through the framework, it would be okay. We're going to address this, and what's ironic is this takes work and it takes
Right.
time.
So how do
And
you handle that? So how let's go back to that because that is true. Like we not only do we have our own team, but we have 80 agents within our two offices. So a lot of this is what we do, which is just so great. But your framework is amazing. And the first thing we tell the agents to do is go sit down next to my husband because he likes to be in the office front and center. That's his command center. I'm kind of out all over the place. And we always say just sit next to Adam and he'll be talking to agents all day and you'll hear how he speaks, what the issue is, what arises. You know, you'll never, these will never all happen to you, but you'll hear how he's speaking to them. And so that is so important. That was your number two, I believe it was. Um, but how do you handle it when you're, okay, we had the new commission structure that came out and so much training went out and meeting with the attorneys and going through it over and over. And then a month goes by, 2 months, and then all of a sudden they're like, how do I do that? I mean, how do you like not get upset? How do you with someone that you've given so much training to? So I know the old you would have done something different, but now in the framework, how do you handle something like that?
um, I go back to frequency and duration, right? And um, is if you know wholeheartedly that you've provided the right guidance, the knowledge, the tools, the support, and things of that nature, you know, um, and
Over
that's
and over and over
over,
again.
that's group, and that is one on one, right? And then and you've given them ample time to experiment and learn. Okay,
Mhm.
you've given them ample opportunity well, because what can happen in because you're talking about the whole buyer agency, buyer brokerage commission, all that stuff, right? So you could have done something 2 3 months ago, right? And you trained them and you supported your team and things of that nature. But for what this one individual didn't have a client for 2 3 months.
Mhm.
So now this is their first experience of having to deal with it versus somebody else on your team, they may be on their 10th experience with having to deal with it.
Mhm.
So now you have to go back and say, well, I can't compare the person who's got the first experience to the person who's got the 10th experience because that's not fair. Because we know in learning that the real training happens when you actually have to do it, correct? Like
Mhm.
that when you have the practical
Right.
example, like situation, we know that that's when the real training develops. So that would be one thing I would look at. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Now, if somebody continually isn't getting something and you you sincerely have done everything you can do, I think at that point you have to say, okay, is this just not the right fit for them? Is there a better fit in another role for a team? Is there's a disconnect somewhere? Um, and I'll throw this in there. I'm an independent consultant. This is also something fairly recent since Cohesion XQ, with a personality assessment organization, and it's a phenomenal tool because I'll send you the link. Just send it to you. You send you the
Right.
link. It takes 7 minutes. You check some words, and it spits out what your innate personality is. So what was developed by the age of 12, and then the
Okay.
second part of it makes you go through the same words, but now it says, "Hey, Debbie, this is now you as a role as a brokerage owner, team leader." And what we look for is where's the synergy and where's the gap. So for example, you could think of a glorified disc. That's the best way I can really describe it, right? Where
Mhm.
everybody who's been around for a while should know what the disc test is, right? So you took the disc and it gave you some basic knowledge, and it was like, okay, well, if they're not a D and an I, they're going to be terrible as an agent, right? That was the old school methodology, right? If you were an SLC, like, don't hire them as an agent. They're terrible. They're a transaction coordinator, right? And I had a different spin to that, and I said, well, I don't know that that's fair. And I said, what we have to do is create a job for them because they're not going to function like the D and the I, right? They're not just going to be able to get up and go like I am. So an S and a C doesn't mean that they can't be successful in real estate. They actually might be really good in real estate because they're very methodical, they're very patient, they're very systematic. But what we got to do is create a job for them. We got to create a daily checklist for them of what they got to do to go through. So what this
Mhm.
innate assessment starts to tell you is it starts to tell you where people are innately at. So for example, this individual, we start, you run this assessment and it starts telling you, well, yeah, they don't have any patience. They hate rules, right? They're highly autonomous, right? Things of that nature. They're highly social. So you're like, okay, well, they're very autonomous. So they're the driver. They're very social. They'd be good, but they don't like rules. They don't have any patience. So I don't know. I mean, because being an agent takes a little bit of patience, right? And
Right.
things of that nature. But maybe they're better and I'm going to be funny here, but maybe they're better as an EXP recruiter, right? Because just and I was I'm gonna I was with EXP for 2 years, so slow down if you're all mad at me because you're with EXP. So right, but because they're very they are driven, but they don't want
Right.
rules. They just want to get out there. They want to right. Well, it'd be a perfect fit for you, right? Kind of thing like that. And so it'd be the perfect role. So then we're just maybe in the wrong role. So that's what the assessment. The reason I decided to partner with the company was because I was like, okay, this insight can be very, very valuable to leaders and to the individual because now we can see why there's a disconnect. And at the end of the day, we also have to acknowledge that sometimes there's a disconnect and
Mhm.
people are not in the right they're not in the right place. They're just not in the right place. They're not in the right industry. They're not in the right X. And it's okay to separate, but now we kind of know why we're separating, right?
Right.
Versus like, oh, it's not working out. Well, what does that mean, right? Right?
Right.
It's not
Right.
working out XYZ kind of thing. So you can just have more clarity and more direction with your communication. So I mean, leadership can be exhausting and frustrating. It
Right.
absolutely can be. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, let's take a quick commercial break because we went way over. We'll be right back with the doctor and more of his amazing methods and formulas for success. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Art of Real Estate. I'm your host, Debbi DiMaggio. We are here with Dr. Al. This is incredible. This is so much fun. I'm a realtor, but I'm also a coach. So I want to ask you some. So, where I get frustrated as a coach is that, people want to get help and then you start to go through all of the things, but they don't they don't want to do the work. They want to be successful. They take so long to get their license or they've been in it a while and then they want to go to the next level and I'm guilty of saying, well, I work all the time. That's why I'm successful. I mean, and it's never easy. It's not like I'm successful and I never have to work. I continually work at it and it's been 35 years and oftentimes I don't feel like I'm very successful. So when someone who is new and they're so gung ho, but you start to go through the things that they need to work on, but they're not doing the things that you've set in place, or they make excuses. How do you deal with that? How do you handle that?
Yeah, that's tough. Um, that's tough because when you're running, and I think the answer varies a little bit. Okay, when you're running a team, you're the leader. You're going to set the pace of this team, right? The goals of this team. You're going to set that. You're going to set that. And one of the things that's very, very important with that is you have to have buy-in from everybody. So let me give you this example. You take a top level athletic organization, okay? Top level athletic organization. Everybody in the organization has buy-in that we're going to be national champions this year, or we're going to go on this national championship hunt this year, kind of thing, right? And I'll give you an example. When Peyton Manning came to the Broncos, one of the things he did, like he you want to talk about an impeccable leader and a silent leader, like this guy is a stud. One of the things
Wow.
he did with the Broncos organization is he made everybody in the organization believe and feel like they were a part of the team that was going to win a Super Bowl. It didn't matter if it was the janitor. It didn't matter if it was the receptionist at the front desk. It did not matter who that individual was within the Broncos organization. Didn't matter what their role was. He made them feel like $1 million and they were part of the journey. That because if they didn't do X, well, then it doesn't allow Y and Z to occur,
Mhm.
right? Kind of thing. That we have this domino effect. We work in synergy here, right? And all
Mhm.
of us have to do our little pieces to be able to make this a goal. So when you look at that, and that's very common in top tier teams, right? Top tier athletic teams, is that everybody feels like if the Kansas City Royals win the World Series, like they were all a part of it. They all had something to do with the Royals winning the World Series. Okay,
Mhm.
so that's one thing. The other thing that's very different between top tier athletic programs and corporate America is one word, and it's honesty and transparency.
Mhm.
In a high level athletic program, you're held accountable in front of your peers. There's no such thing as human resources, right? Like you can't
Right.
talk to me like that. Oh, yes, I can. And I'm going to call you out in front of all your team members, right? All my kids were collegiate athletes, right? Well, my youngest is still there. And you're going to get called out in front of all your teammates if you don't do your job. Now, that doesn't mean they're expecting perfection, right? But if you don't show up because you just didn't feel like showing up or you stayed up too
Mhm.
late, no, unacceptable, man. Unacceptable. That's an unacceptable behavior because of our where we all agreed we were going. So when you bring it back to AK like a real estate team or corporate
Mhm.
team, the biggest disconnect is they don't care. They
Right.
don't care. They don't care whether your team is number one or number 600. They don't care. It's just a means to an end right now. That's all it is. And as
Mhm.
we all know, there's a lot of disloyalty in real estate, right?
Mhm.
So the some teams run on like that Walmart, right? They're bringing in people and like spinning them, right? And I'm like, that's crazy. Like, do you not understand recruitment and retention and how painful that is? You do you, right? And like, oh yeah, we pay our baggage agents 25%. What? Well, that's why they're leaving every 2 weeks, kind of thing, right? And then you have teams that more like a boutique team that puts a lot of time and effort, and then when somebody leaves, it's like, wow, I got stabbed in the back, like because the problem with real
Right.
estate, once people feel like they're successful, they're like, oh, I don't need a team anymore, right? I'm gonna go
Right.
do this on my own, right? Why am I giving
Right.
X percent commission to this, right? That's one of the epidemics within the business, right? Is that people then feel
Right.
like they could just go on their own. So then as a team leader, you're like, man, I trust them. But guess what? What if I told you that's prevalent in restaurant industry? I know so many
Mhm.
restaurant owners. A lot of them are like Indian food, Mexican food, Asian food, right? Their cooks end up being their biggest competitor, but they're the ones
Wow.
that train them on the menu and the cook. And then the cook's like, all right, I can just go open my own restaurant up now. And they go and open
Right.
their right? So at some point, right, competition is competition. Competition is healthy, but I think the biggest thing of where we struggle within these corporate teams and real estate teams is that most people don't care, and that's the
Mm.
truth, because we only talk about our, oh, we want to be number one, or we want this gold circle award, which, by the way, realtors, the consumers have no idea what that is on your email signature. They have
Right.
no idea what that means. Like, there's no literal translation, so leave it off, right? Like, it doesn't translate to anything other than your ego. So make it mean something to your clients who aka read your emails. Whole nother podcast. So the thing is how do you then get buy-in that they really want to be a part of this team, right? And they care about the success of the team. So
Mhm.
now you look at, okay, well, giving them their split isn't good enough, right? So what's the reward for them for helping you get to be the number one team? What's the reward for them? Do you bonus them? Do you take them on an all-inclusive vacation? Do you give them a
Mhm.
car like network marketing companies do? Do you what is the reward for them helping you be number one? What's the reward? If not, they're just doing their job. So whatever. You're the one that became successful because of their grassroots efforts, right? Because you want
Mhm.
them to go from 10 closings to 20 closings. And that's the minimum standard. And if you don't have 6,000 people in the team database by January 31st of this year that scrub, but we're going to get rid of you. Again, who's winning on this? Who's really winning? It's all egomaniacs from the person running the team, right?
Mm.
What's yes, we know that they're going to make more money if they have more production. I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? We know that. But what else is there? What drives them to want to buy into the team goal? What drives them to want to buy in? And here's the thing, if they don't buy into the team goal, then they're not a team player. They shouldn't probably be on your team. It's as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
So every agent wants to have a team, and I'm always like, why? Because it sounds cool, or is it because it was in some book and you're supposed to leverage your time by having a team? But yeah, then it's like, okay, well, you got to get a team. So that's where coaching athletic teams, to some degree, there's something tangible, right? We're going to have an undefeated season, or we're going to go 500, or we're going to try to qualify for nationals, or whatever it is. There's something tangible there that everybody grabs onto, that now when we come back to mastery experience, when we come back to all these things, remember, we have a commitment. We've got a commitment. We're not going to make it to nationals if we practice like this. Nobody talks like that in corporate America. Nobody talks like that. So if you could change the language to getting people that really care and figuring out, okay, what's going to want them to be proud of XYZ, right? Like
Mhm.
that they feel like part of something. So it's really tricky. And again, this is where you see where SWAT teams, athletic environments, this is how they function.
Mhm.
This is how they function. So how do we bring it into the world of real estate, right? And being a kind of a top tier team, or whatever, top tier brokerage, whatever the case is, right? Because we also know that some brokerages, as long as I think you're alive, you can be there. Um,
That's true.
yeah,
That
right.
is very true. Well, so that wasn't, I mean, this is good for people who run teams that way and want to be the number one team. So I do want you to answer how do you incentivize that person? That's not my question. My question is that I'm a very different type of person. I want to help people succeed and find success for themselves. I'm not thinking that whatever that little bit that we're taking, that's going to make some big difference. I want to help that person get their first deal. I want to help that person follow the steps to get where they need to go. So those are two different things. One is, yes, finish the thought by all means on the people who want to grow their team and be number one. I mean, because people do
Yeah.
want to do
Well, I mean, even on that single agent though, right? They they have to innately want the success. You can't
that.
want
Right.
it for them,
I
right?
know. And I think that's the problem. I want it so bad for them.
No, they got to want it for themselves. So that's the thing. They people have to want something for themselves. And if they want something for themselves, then they seek guidance, they seek mentorship, they seek counsel, right? And they're constantly fueling their mind, and they're at it. I think the issue with our industry is that people get lured by what they see on social media and the commission and this and
Right.
that. They have no idea what goes into any of that, right? So then
Right.
then when they get a license, and yeah, red flag is somebody who takes 6 months to get a real estate license, right? Versus like 3 weeks, right? Like how serious are you kind of thing, right? Now, someone
Right.
transitioning careers or, I'm going to retire from here and I'm going to do a very different story, right? But someone who comes to you go, no, I want to be successful in real estate and I'm committed to getting a license. And oh my God, yes, the reality is, are you willing to work 7 days a week?
Right.
That's the first
Exactly.
question.
That is.
Well,
That is.
I kind of like Sunday fun day. Okay, well, you're not going to make it.
I
So,
remember I didn't even know what Sunday Fun Day was until like 30 years into my career. And I was like, someone's like Sunday Fun Day. I'm like, what is that? I've never had a Sunday Fun
right,
Day.
you're out hustling, right? You're open houses, you're showing homes, you're doing what you got to do.
Yeah.
And the thing is it's just you're just you're paying your dues. But again, let's put it in a framework of the top level athletes, right?
Hmm.
Like like on Sunday in theory, unless my son has games or whatever the case may be, it's an off day typically. There's no structured team workouts or anything. But I
Hmm.
can tell you what him and some of his top teammates are doing on Sundays, right?
Right.
They're in practice with themselves,
Hmm.
right? Whether they lift, whether they throw, whether what he plays baseball, right? Whatever it is they're doing, they're mastering that craft. So it goes back to mastery experience, right? It's if you want the success, you gotta be willing to do the work and raise the bar. And unfortunately, I think real estate, a lot of people get into it because they think it's convenient. They think it's
Hmm.
flexible. They think you can make a ton of money. All true once you're successful, but you got to get there. And
Right.
getting there requires I mean, you got to pound the pavement in this business, man. You got to be willing to be super focused and get after it and things of that nature. So, I think in your case it's you potentially, I don't know you well, but you potentially want the success more than they want it for themselves.
Yeah. Right. I think
And
that's what happens.
that's the issue, right?
Right.
That's the issue. Yeah.
And they'll get there on their own time, and that's their prerogative to do that. Tell us a biggest challenge. It could have been with you, or it could have been with when you were coaching the SWAT team or one of the CEOs. Share a biggest challenge and how you or they overcame that.
Well, I mean, there's numerous, right?
I know.
I think I'll go back to my own real estate team actually on this example.
Okay.
So, full disclosure, I never wanted a team. Let's just start with that, um, because I knew the amount of work it would take. And my business partner, he came to me when he was 19. Um, First 6 months were really, really hard for him. I didn't have a team. He just asked me if I'd be his mentor. Okay. And I'd been a part of teams before. I'd been on leadership with teams before, things of that nature. And I was like, well, I kind of just like doing my own thing, right? Because I have many verticals. And he was like, well, I'm just, interviewing a lot of people. And we had a personal relationship. And he
Mhm.
said, I want you to be my mentor. I said, why do you want me to be your mentor? He goes, well, you were the only one that asked me if I had plans to go back to school, to college, because he had a situation that he needed to take some time off. And he goes, nobody else asked me that. And he goes, so it showed me you actually cared. And I said, yeah, for sure, right? Like, absolutely.
Mhm.
So he was my mentee, and we kind of had an informal agreement. Does that make sense? Because I didn't have a team, right? So I was just going to get
Right.
a cut of so many deals. You know what I mean? Which, by the way, I do want to put this plug in. You never do mentorship on the number of deals. You do it on the number of buy sides and the number of listings. Because
Oh,
what if the
okay.
first 10 deals are all buy side and then they get their first listing? Like,
And they have no experience. Right.
square one again, right? So whether you do 5 buyers and 3 listings or whatever the case may be, just set up your mentorship like that. So
Nice.
first 6 months he struggled, but he put in a lot of effort, and so then the next following 12 months. So now we're at 18 months in his journey. He had 21 closings, and
Wow.
yeah,
That's great. That's great.
he was young. He was real good on Instagram. So what happened is he started to get an audience, a following, but not of consumers, of people that wanted to be realtors. They were inspired by his success. Pretty powerful, right? Pretty powerful.
Yes.
So he came
Yes.
and he said, "Hey, can we start a team?" And I'm like, "No, like absolutely not, right?" And he's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Dude, that's a lot of work. Like it's a lot." So I'm trying to explain it to him, right? And he's like, "Well, I'll do all the work. I need you just as oversight and stuff like that." So I'm like, you know what? He looked up to me. I'm his mentor. Like, I'll meet him halfway. Let's do this, right? Like, we'll do this. So what I realized is along the way is he didn't have any leadership experience,
Right.
right? So we would have team meetings and people would come 15 minutes late and things of that nature. And then I was like, so I would get frustrated and we weren't
Mhm.
getting the results out of the team. So we were recruiting good, we were recruiting. I didn't have, my PhD at the time. I didn't have this framework. I didn't have the personality assessment. I didn't have some of the tools I have today or the
Right.
knowledge. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, well, we're not making any money. They're driving us crazy, right? And the like I don't even know that they care. And then I looked in the mirror and I said, well, what kind of leader are you being? Right? Like what are you putting your best foot forward to lead this team? So I called him and I said, okay, we got to change the plans. I'm gonna go 100% on running this team, right? Like you can handle like the mentoring and stuff like that, but let me just go full on board on structure, on meetings, on trainings, on that kind of stuff, right? Like stuff like that. So we did that, and then actually we developed a very successful team, very all bilingual, very very.
Nice.
And so what I attributed to that was I wanted a result,
Mhm.
but I wasn't putting in the work myself, and so I had to go back to the drawing board as the guy and say, okay, if I want the results, I've got to put in the work. And so I had to change with me first because then I could command showing up on time. You're going to pay attention. You're going to do this. Here's our standards. Blah 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 blah. And and all of a sudden, when we started doing that, we started to then get better buy-in, right? Better,
Mhm.
right, more sense of okay, we're operating as one and things of that nature. So I would say that's just an example is a lot of times when you want the change you got to look at yourself first
No,
and
that's excellent. That is really a great that
got,
is very great.
you got to make the change to you first,
Right.
and people need to see it. They need to see the consistency of it. They need to see the
Mhm.
sincerity, and then when they see that, people will either latch on or they'll move away. And the people that latch on, you now have buy-in from. The people that move away, it's fine. It's just not the right ship, right?
Right.
They need
I like that.
a
I
different
like
ship.
that about the buy-in. I think that's super important because even though they jump in, maybe if they're not going to buy in, maybe it's not, people do come in and out of this business in a week or 2 weeks or 5 months, and they're in and they're out very quickly. One of the things I did with one of the people that we hired, I said, and I've been really bad in the past about hiring just in general, because I like people. So I'm like, I want to give everyone a chance. So I took myself out of the hiring position for quite some time until I was able to figure out how to do it correctly. And then I became we'll talk to you, then you should go talk to other offices and then come back and get a feel for how we all are. And if you're still interested, then we can continue the conversation. I think before it was just like, yeah, we'd love to have you. You referred by. So it's you, as you said, you weren't leading because it was new, and then you started learning, and it's so important. Let's talk a little bit about. Well, actually, let's. If you so as a coach or as a leader, what are 5 things that you would impart on your new team members?
Um, so like within a real estate team kind of thing.
Yes, let's stick with the real estate. Yeah.
Um, what are 5 things I would impart? Um,
As let's say they just joined your team, and you're
yeah,
just starting out. How do you where do you
yeah,
start?
yeah. I think the first thing is your rewards are going to come from your efforts.
Hmm.
So um, you can have a very nice lifestyle. Real estate can provide a very very nice lifestyle for you. right? Um, but you got to be willing to do the work and be coachable to be able to create that lifestyle, right? And really, really understand it. Number two would be, if you don't own a house, your first goal needs to be, you need to buy a house. You need to go through the process yourself. I actually just
Mhm.
wish the commission would make that a rule nationwide, that you can be a realtor unless you own a primary residence. How about that? Right? Know
Right.
what it's like to buy a house and qualify for a loan and go through inspection, be nervous as shit whether something's going to approach correctly. Like, yeah, like know what that feels like, bro, before
Right,
you start.
right.
You love real estate. Like, yeah. So, big pet peeve of mine, right? So, um, know what it feels like. Know what it feels like. Number three would be, there's many ways to skin this cat.
Mhm.
Many ways to skin the cat. My job is to show you the ways, like the options. It's your
Mhm.
job to pick three of them and master them, right? So
Right.
whether it be starting out that you're gonna do open houses, okay, cool. Well, what, you think you just show up and put, if your open house is 11, you put signs in the yard at 11? No, 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 no. Right? Learn how to be an open house master, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and there's tons of good stuff out there, right? On how to do that. So I would say pick three things and get after it. Um,
Mhm.
Number four is, I need you to read. And I need you to read about mindset, about entrepreneurship, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, I don't know that I've ever met anybody who's successful who hasn't failed and hasn't
Mhm.
had obstacles and hasn't had challenges. Um, I'd like to meet somebody who I guess has never had any challenges, but I'd be like puzzled, be like, well, how did that happen, right? Like, um, but at the end of the day, you just got to understand it's part of the journey, and this is where you grow. It's how you bounce back, right? It's how you bounce
Mhm.
back from X. And the last thing, the fifth thing would be, do not go spend your commission until it's actually in your bank account. I don't care if it's the day before and you have a clear to close and you think you're going to make 12 grand tomorrow. Dude, you don't have 12 grand, right? Once the wire hits, now you've got 12 grand, right? But
Right.
I just financial wherewithal, right? Because we all know
Mhm.
that we can have periods where we make a ton of money, and then all
Mhm.
of a sudden it's like vamp, right? And then we
Right.
go tons of money and it's like vamp, right? So just
Right.
teach them kind of some money management tips, right? Kind
Right.
of stuff, right? Your first closing, don't go to Dubai, right? Like, dude,
Right.
that's just right? Like, slow down, right? Like, let's get this duplicated. So one of the things that one of my mentors along the way told me, he said, he said, don't change your lifestyle until after 2 years of making the income to change your life,
Mm. I like that. I like that. That's great. I
right?
cannot believe we are at the top of the hour. We made one commercial out of three. This was so fascinating. I'm going to have you on again. How do people get a hold of you so they can continue to hear and work with you?
Well, there's a few different ways. So on Instagram, it's at Coach Al Philip Neri, no hyphen, just all one. My Can I give out my email? I mean, because
You sure
it's
can. You sure can.
so the email is my name. It's ALP as in Paul, HILI, P as in Paul, N as in Nancy, ERI at gmail.com. So if you email me and you want to jump on a Zoom strategy session, we can talk. If you're more interested in that innate personality assessment, more than happy to send you a link so you can do it. If it makes sense for your team, we can talk about what that looks like. If you want me to present at your team, workshops, your brokerage, whatever the case, I love this stuff. I really, really love it. And one of the most recent presentations I just did to a big agent group was the toxicity of social media and comparing yourself to people on social media.
Mhm.
And that's a whole nother podcast if we ever want to go there. But
Okay.
my what I would tell agents is, we talk about mindset, we talk about belief, we talk about all this stuff. But what we're not talking about is one of the biggest triggers in the world today, which is social media, that is making a lot of people feel like they're failures and that they're
Mm,
incompetent and they're not successful. So being that your podcast is geared towards agents, it's very prevalent right now in the real estate space
right.
that you're wondering why you're not successful and these people are. And all I'm going to leave you with is you don't know that they
Right. That's
are.
so true. Right. They can have a really great social media presence, but yeah, that's so true. I mean, it's beautiful to look at, and it's frustrating that I can't figure out how to, pull it all together like that. But that is very true. You don't know for
Yep.
sure. I
So
agree.
email, hit me up on Instagram. Those are probably two ways. I mean, if you Google me, I mean, you'll find me on Facebook. You'll find me on LinkedIn. I mean, you'll find me in all the major, well, on those platforms actually. I don't really mess around.
Awesome. Well, if you would send me the link to the personality, and then just send me an email with your links that you just shared, and I will pop that on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, I
So
will, and
thank
I appreciate you having me, and I've enjoyed the conversation. And you're right, an hour
Thank
for
you. I
yeah.
know, right? Thank you so much. It was incredible. We'll do it again for sure. We have lots of topics. I'm writing a new book on mindset, so we have, and
That's
there's a lot to do with sports. Even though
okay.
I'm not an athlete, but there's a lot of that in it. So that's kind of the layout of it. So we'll talk about that. Thank you so
All right.
much, Dr. Al. It was incredible speaking with you today.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Tune in each week for another episode of Mastering the Art of Real Estate with host Debbi DiMaggio. Here Fridays, noon Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network. Tune in to where real estate matters matter.